The scene begins to an island where a boy is trying to bury several people who have died in an attack. After the man asked the boy's name, it was finally revealed that he was Kenshin when he was very young and still uses his real name Shinta. After learning that Shinta has a strong potential to become a samurai, the man named Hiko Seijuro promised to train Shinta so that he could become a great swordsman in the future. He also changes Shinta's name to Kenshin. A moment later, Kenshin woke up and found himself in an old house which turned out to be the home of his master. Kenshin asked if Seijuro had found a girl who drifted with him, but he said he only found Kenshin alone. He said that Kenshin had been unconscious for 3 days. Kenshin then asked his master to help teach him a secret sword technique called Hiten Mitsurugi. Fortunately, Seijuro agrees to Kenshin's request, but before teaching the technique, he wants to test Kenshin's abilities first. Meanwhile, on a beach in Tokyo, the residents were surprised by the appearance of Makoto's large warship, so they ran towards the city to warn the other residents. After Makoto's large warship docked on a beach, he fired several cannons. As a result, the residents could only run in fear to save themselves. Misao managed to save Okina. She didn't expect that Aoshi, a former captain of the Oniwa Banshu squad, would have the heart to do cruel things to Okina, a former member of the Oniwa Banshu squad. She felt very angry with Aoshi and intended to take revenge on him. Kenshin was still practicing his sword against Seijuro. In that fight, he could easily beat Kenshin even though he only used a wooden stick as a weapon. He warns Kenshin not to misuse Hiten Mitsurugi's move because that move should be used to protect weak people, not for political gain. Meanwhile, Makoto's troops meet the Prime Minister, Hito Hirobumi, a government representative who wants to negotiate. Makoto promised not to attack Tokyo if Hito wanted to hand over Kenshin and execute him in front of them. Hearing these conditions, Hito had no choice but to sacrifice Kenshin to save Tokyo and the Japanese government. Soon after, Hito and the government began distributing poster leaflets in various places so everyone could report Kenshin's whereabouts to the police. From that day on, Kenshin was officially a fugitive from the government and would be executed in front of rebel forces. The news about Kenshin has reached the Oniwabanshu Inn. Sanosuke and the others are very disappointed with the decision taken by the government. However, at the same time, they felt relieved after knowing that Kenshin was still alive. Not long after, they received news that Kaoru had been found and was currently receiving treatment at a hospital. Sanosuke and the others rushed to the hospital to check if she was okay. When they arrived at the hospital, they found that she still had a high fever and was unconscious. Kenshin was repeatedly knocked down by attacks from Seijuro. Kenshin did not give up and continued fighting against him. In that training, Kenshin was reminded of old memories when he kept trying to get back up even though his master had knocked him down repeatedly. Okina, finally awake, he ordered Misao to look for Kenshin's whereabouts after finding out that he was still alive. That night, Seijuro asked about the scratches on Kenshin's face. He told Seijuro that he got those scars when he was still a Batosai. Soon after, Seijuro asked if the person he would face was also a Batosai like him. Kenshin said that Makoto was much tougher than himself, and even Makoto's men had managed to beat him in a sword duel battle. After hearing those words, Seijuro started to move to help Kenshin learn the Hiten Mitsurugi technique. But before he teaches the technique, Seijuro asks him to reflect on his mistakes in every fight he has done so far. That night, Kenshin tried to think about what was wrong with him, but until morning came, he still couldn't figure it out. That morning, Seijuro gave him a sharp sword and asked him to fight a serious duel so that Seijuro could show him what wrong all this time was. The fierce battle between them finally begins. In this fight, Seijuro really intended to kill Kenshin. When Kenshin is getting cornered and almost killed, he finally finds out about the mistake that his master is referring to. He realized that he had never been afraid of death when fighting against enemies all this time. Seijuro explains that his remorse for his past mistakes has made Kenshin weak and unafraid of death. Seijuro tells him to have a strong will to survive and start thinking about his happiness to become stronger. Sanosuke found that Kaoru had left her room and gone to the beach alone to find Kenshin. Sanosuke and Yahiko ran to the beach to pick up Kaoru, who was still not fully recovered. Kaoru invited them to go to Tokyo and look for Kenshin. Meanwhile, Kenshin has now succeeded in mastering Hiten Mitsurugi's sword moves, thanks to the help of his master. When Kenshin was about to leave Seijuro's house, Misao suddenly told him that Kaoru was still alive. She also tells him that he has become a fugitive from the government. Before Kenshin left, Seijuro told him to always be careful and fight to be able to return from the battlefield alive. After that, Kenshin and Misao went to the Onawabanshu Inn to meet Okina before their departure to Tokyo. But when they arrived at the inn, they found that Okina had left the place and gone to the secret path that Kenshin would follow later. Okina deliberately came to that place to stop Aoshi, who was still obsessed with revenge on Kenshin. While still seriously injured, Okina tries to fight against Aoshi to awaken him and not to do revenge. Unfortunately, because Okina's body is still not fully recovered, he can easily beat Okina. Shortly after, Kenshin arrived at the location along with Misao, who rushed to save Okina. Aoshi met Kenshin, and their fight started. While continuing to remember Seijuro's message to fight with the fear of death, Kenshin tried to fight Aoshi, who was still consumed by anger. Soon after, Misao tried to help him defeat Aoshi, but Aoshi could easily throw her body, making her fall to the ground. This incident made Kenshin feel very angry, so he became even more serious to fight. After a fierce fight, Kenshin finally beat Aoshi without killing him. He realized that Aoshi was still obsessed with the title of a Batusai, so Kenshin was ready to accept his challenge if he wanted to fight for the second time. After the fight ended, Kenshin continued his journey to Kamiya's dojo. Megumi greeted him, who had been worried about his condition all this time. Seeing Kenshin looking messy, she gave him a red shirt that Kaoru had left for him. Soon after, the Tokyo police force surrounded Kamiya's dojo and arrested Kenshin. Even though there was a short fight, Kenshin finally surrendered himself to the police, so there would be no more victims. Meanwhile, at Makoto's headquarters, Hoji informs Makoto that the condition of the burns on his body is getting worse, and he can't fight too long. If Makoto is determined to fight for more than 15 minutes, his body will get hotter, and he can be burned to death. Back to Kenshin, who has been arrested by the police and brought in front of Prime Minister Hito. Soon after, Hito apologized to him because the Japanese government had to sacrifice him so that Makoto and his troops would not dominate the Japanese government. On that day, the police officers took Kenshin to the beach, where he would be executed in front of Makoto and his troops. The residents of Tokyo also gathered to witness the execution, including Kaoru and her other friends. They asked the authorities to stop the execution, but unfortunately the execution continued. Hoji announced all of Kenshin's mistakes in the past when he was still a Batosai by mentioning the names of the samurai he had killed. After Hoji finished reading all the names, the executioner prepared to behead Kenshin with a sword. But unexpectedly, the executioner untied Kenshin's hands. It turned out that the executioner was Saito, and the execution was just a tactic prepared by the police so that Kenshin could approach Makoto. In the end, the battle between the government troops and Makoto's troops finally began. Then Sanosuke joined the fight and helped the police. After that, Kenshin and Sanosuke go with the rest of the police force to Makoto's warship, while Saito and the others will try to defeat Makoto's troops, who are still left on a beach in Tokyo. Saito is still superior and can even defeat samurai from Makoto's 10 Swords army. Arriving at Makoto's warship, Kenshin and Sanosuke began fighting against Makoto's troops. On the other hand, Kenshin must return to fight against Seijuro, who previously defeated him and could break his sword. Fortunately, thanks to intensive training with his master, Kenshin managed to dominate the fight and defeat Seijuro until his sword broke. A tense battle between Kenshin and Makoto finally begins. At the beginning of the fight, Makoto seems superior to him, who could only make defensive moves without having a chance to launch a counterattack. Besides that, Makoto's sword can emit very hot bursts of fire, making it even more difficult for Kenshin to face him. Fortunately, Saito arrived at the warship, and with Sanosuke, they tried to defeat Makoto. Not long after, Aoshi also came to the ship and intended to kill Makoto because he wanted to be the only person who defeated Kenshin, the legendary Batosai. As a result, Makoto has to fight against 4 people at once, namely Kenshin, Saito, Sanosuke, and Aoshi. Unexpectedly, even though Makoto only fought alone, he managed to dominate the battle and toppled Saito, Sanosuke, and Aoshi. Soon after, Makoto's female assistant, Yumi, realizes that Makoto has exceeded the time limit for the fight, and his body is slowly heating up. So she begs Kenshin to stop the fight. But the unexpected happened again. Makoto suddenly used this opportunity to stab Kenshin. Because of that, he had to stab Yumi's body at the same time. Makoto then carried Yumi's dying body and put her on the other side so he could continue his fight. Kenshin, who saw this incident, became very angry and finally ended the fight with the Hiten Mitsurugi stance he had learned from his master. With one hit by Hiten Mitsurugi, he slashed Makoto's neck and sent Makoto flying so hard that he fell to the floor. Makoto, who was already dying, carried Yumi's body to the top of the stairs before he finally died due to excessive heat, which caused his body to burn out. With the death of Makoto and the destruction of his warship, the Japanese government forces finally defeated his troops and protected Tokyo. Upon the arrival of Kenshin and Sanosuke on a beach in Tokyo, Prime Minister Hito and Japanese officials greeted them and saluted the samurai. Hito declares that Kenshin's title as a Batusai has been officially removed, and his reputation has now been restored. The film closes with a scene where Kenshin and his friends live in Kamiya's dojo in peace and quiet.